All right, everybody.
Hey.
Plastic Posse live stream. We are here tonight. Myself and Ivan and JB with Marcus Nicholls from Tamiya Model Magazine International. Marcus, thanks so much for joining us.
You are welcome. Absolutely welcome. No, it's great. I think I'm one of the last to be on this because I've been hopeless. I'm not in any way a Luddite, but I just sometimes think, oh my goodness, why would anyone want to listen to me drone on about modeling? So, it's or anything. So no, it's very kind of you to ask me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming on with us. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So John, we'll kind of turn the reins over to you and let's get going.
Yeah, sure. So Marcus, again, thanks so much for joining us. And also it's good to see you again. I think the last time we spoke, face to face outside of the virtual world was the 2011, 2012 IPMS Nationals in Omaha, Nebraska.
In, Omaha?
Yeah, exactly.
Got together, my goodness. Yeah, I think that was good grief. That's 11 years ago.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. So
it sure does. It does.
Again, certainly thank you so much for joining us. Maybe to just start off with our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe more of the personal side of, your professional development and how you came into, your current role?
Well, I hope you're sitting comfortably.
Good.
Dear. I mean, I've actually, because I have been a bit kind of behind the curve on the podcasts, and so this afternoon I've been listening up to everyone else's just to see what they're saying. And it's one recurring thing is that I think we're all modelers. I mean, I'm 55, and so I was building models. I started at the age of 8, I think, in the 70s. My dad was an architect, and so he was very much of the generation of building his own architectural models, because he was an aero modeler. He used to actually buy Aero Modeler magazine, which we now publish, which is kind of a strange circle being completed. And so he was very natural model maker, building model buildings, architectural models with balsa wood and card and so on, and so it was absolutely natural that he would have given me a kit. So I built models from a young age, like everyone, and then you get to, I don't know, what age would have I stopped? Probably when I went to college at 16, and then you find other things are going on, with young ladies and alcohol and all sorts of terrible things like that. So yeah, that came to a complete halt. And then I picked it up again after, I don't know, I'm going to say late 80s, I suppose, when I'd, settled down, not settled down at all, but, things had just changed. And I was actually I live about 20 miles out of London. And so frequent trips into the West End meant that I always end up at a massive toy store called Hamleys, which is, I suppose, a little bit like the old FAO Schwartz in New York City. And they used to have a model kit department. It actually wasn't terrible for a mainstream store. And I saw a Tamiya, I think it was the 250 half track. And I thought, oh, that's nice. And so I bought that. And at the similar time, I had been looking at some Verlinden catalogs, which were kind of hot and new then. I thought, I can do this, and painted this 250. And it was absolutely terrible, of course. And I just thought I've got to, learn how it was the shading technique was all really, really the thing I wanted to learn. I just absolutely no clue about how to do that. But I consider myself a photographer, which is odd. If I had to pin down a profession, even though I've been an editor for a long time, because that's what I studied at college. And I won't bore you with the total ins and outs, but I ended up getting a job in the dark rooms at a company then called Argus Specialist Publications in the town where I live, that produced Scale Models magazine, original military modeling, Model Engineer, and about 25 other sort of craft hobby titles. And when I was in there, I met a chap called Ken Jones, who was the editor of Military Modeling, and another gent called Kelvin Barber, who was the Scale Models editor. And they gave me a ton of, well, I say a ton, a good number of kits just to fiddle with and play with, and reviewed a few for them. And then my old granddad died in about 1990 and left me a few thousand, not a vast amount of money, but to go traveling with. He said, go and travel. So my now wife, Emma, but then girlfriend, we went to, here it comes. This is the road trip story. You're gonna regret having asked me this, but we determined to go to the States and to see America. And so in '91, we bought when you could buy an open-ended ticket to Miami, 2 nights in a Quality Inn on South Beach, Miami. And the first thing I did in the first morning, I went out and bought a copy of the Miami Herald and promptly bought myself a 1976 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. Because I needed something big enough that I could drive. I wanted to feel safe in a car, and this is a lot of metal. This is a vast 21-foot boat. Actually, another little adjunct to this. Spoke to the chap who was selling it, who turns out that he was an Israeli guy who had retired in Miami Beach, and his son was a fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force. And when he was on leave, he would come back and spend the summer in Miami with his mum and dad, and he'd buy a clunker, an old car, and he was on his way back, and this was the car that he was selling, and it was this nearly 8-litre 76 Caddy. So I bought that for about $1,000, and we toured the States for 6 months when you could do that, before everything went digital and they found out what an absolute fraud it really was. But yeah, we drove from Miami to Los Angeles and back via New Orleans and Gulf Coast, San Diego, Los Angeles, as I said, and all over the place. Just absolutely fantastic, crazy time. And then when I went back to the UK, as the money ran out, absolutely broke. So I went back to the publishing company and said, hi, everyone, anything going? And at that time, Alan Harmon, whose name I think has been mentioned by the other guys, who is my boss now, and the editor of a radio control model car magazine at the time, was literally that week had the Tamiya crew in offering the contract to publish Tamiya Model magazine. He knew I was a model maker, and so he brought me in as an editorial assistant on the magazine, and that's kind of it. But we've been through lots of curves and ups and downs in the 30 years, good grief, since that. And I've finally a couple of years after doing that, I managed to get the editorship of the magazine. It changed publishers from Argus to a company called Nexus, who were really a bit dicey, but then they moved their premises and they made me redundant, but I'd already been given my old job back by Alan. So it was it was like kind of surfing a wave with the magazine as my surfboard, really. And then it's kind of really come down to the point where, from the COVID things, we've been working from home, hence my little humble hovel here, where I do the magazines and the model building when I get a chance. So, it's 30 years. It was October 91 that I started on that magazine. And, for some insane reason, I'm still doing it. I built a lot of models at the start, but not so many now. But see, I told you regret asking me that.
No, it's good. One of the things I'll mention, I think we're getting a little feedback. Do you hear that, Scott?
Is that me?
I don't know. We're gonna try. I wonder if there's.
I can't hear anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll just go with it. Oh man, I am hearing a little feedback. I think we got it, Scott. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, unfortunately, Marcus, I do believe it's on your side. Maybe if you want to throw in some headphones, that might be best.
You want me to mute?
Yeah.
Is it still there? I can't hear anything.
So I think it's when we talk. It might be some feedback from your speakers. There we go. Cool. So I'll just go real quick. I'll ask a quick question, then turn over to you again. So you mentioned some of the building that you used to do, and you certainly are no slouch today. I mean, your M18 is fantastic. But, when I think of Marcus Nicholls, me growing up, and Tamiya Model Magazine, the model that stands out the most to me is the T55 that was done up in Iraqi markings. And if you could just talk about that build maybe a little bit, I would love to hear about it, because it was a brand new kit at the time, you know, with post shading and chipping. I think it really set the standard, honestly, worldwide for armor modeling at that time.
I mean, it's very kind of you to say. It's really, and people do mention it a lot. I don't know why it struck such a nerve with everyone. But yeah, I mean, it was at a time, what was it, 2003? I think that kit came out, something like that. And it came slightly out of the blue, because Tamiya had traditionally been doing German Allied World War II stuff, you know, and which is very good bread and butter work. And then this kit came along, and honestly, my first reaction was like, oh God, it's one of those kind of flattened looking green Russian tanks. Seriously, you know, I just kind of, my mindset then was like, all Russian tanks are kind of green. And the only thing you can really do to them to make them kind of interesting looking is cover the tracks in pale colored dirt, just to provide some visual relief. I don't really remember what made me do it as a probably totally inaccurate kind of Iraqi scheme. Definitely influenced by Mig, who was my second big influence after Verlinden, there's no question. And he did, I suppose it was probably a T69, because now, you know, everything is much more known about. But me, it was just like, it's a Russian tank that was in Iraqi service. I mean, that was my research really. And yeah, it was as always with I think Brett was saying that, you know, with his arm, he's very confident with his aircraft builds, because he knows exactly the steps to do. He's done loads, you know, and he can really predict what's going to come out with. But when he says his armor, it's like, here it is, I hope I don't mess it up, you know. And that's exactly what the T55 was for me. I'm like, got to do something to make it zing a little bit. Absolutely no idea how I'm going to do this. I painted it green. What did I do? I painted sand and then put the green on. I can't even remember that, but it was, you know, there's that stage of what am I doing with the model, because you build it. I mean, I quite enjoy the build process because it's correctable. So, you know, if you do a fairly massive mistake on an armor kit, particularly, you can correct it, and because the paint's going to cover it. But with paint, you know, unless you don't mind stripping and repainting half a dozen times, then it's kind of more of a commitment. Certainly is for me. And yeah, when I had that kind of stage when it adjusts its base colors on, and I'm thinking that is absolutely appalling. I can't publish this. And so I was just playing with it. It was literally like a kind of test piece, like a paint mule. And it was at the time when I was really, really into pastels, and found that I, you know, really use those a lot on that model. I'm not so confident with them now, strangely, but with that thing, you know, frill model tracks, which are pretty bulletproof, so they went in to a pot of liquid pigment until they were just, you couldn't even tell what they were. They were just a blob of track, and then laid them out overnight. It was the old Humbrol naphthalene thinner, so I was probably destroyed my lungs with that one. But then it dried out just like real mud. Kind of picked them up and gave them a kind of crack on the model bench surface. Most of the dust kind of flew off, and then I'm thinking, well, I'll sand the running treads off, and hey presto, I had these kind of pale, dusty, dry mud encrusted tracks, and that's kind of what actually kept the build going. And then just went in and did heaps of pretty unrealistic chipping and scratching and scoring. You know, what people are doing now, like Martin Kovac, Les Plaskett, who I still think is one of the greatest modelers out there. Absolutely love his stuff. It's so much more refined, you know, what they control their micro painting. And my lovely dear friend Stan Spooner, who we spend a lot of time chatting, and he said to me once, actually, I suppose it's a kind of a backhanded compliment, but he said, what I love about your work, Marcus, is that you're so committed. And it's like, when you say committed, like throwing yourself off a cliff, committed, you know what I mean? I just thought, I mean, yeah, I do commit. I have to finish the models. You know, I don't have the option of saying this isn't going very well, but it's a new Tamiya kit. I'll put it back, come back 6 months. It has to be finished. Otherwise, there's nothing for the cover. So, yeah, that was quite funny. And so, yeah, I was committed with the T55. But then, yeah, it went in the magazine and everyone seemed to like it. And then Mr. Tamiya wrote to me, big head, but he said, I love this. If I can have it, please, I'll bring you to Japan for a week.
That's a great deal.
Like, oh, I'm at my back, you know. Oh, go on then, you know. So yeah, and that coincided actually because again, Stan was talking about the TamiyaCon shows back in the early 2000s, which were terrific, and it was the best prize in model making by far. And I was very lucky enough to be able to go to a handful of those shows, and then I went to the one literally like I don't know, it was like 2 weeks before the Japan show. So I was in Los Angeles, California, flew into Los Angeles, California for 10 days and then a short break and then off to Shizuoka for the model show in 2003. And that's when I handed the T55 to Mr. Tamiya. And I actually don't know where it is now. It was in the Tamiya museum at Shizuoka for a while. Then I think it went to Tamiya America, but I'm not actually sure. It's somewhere.
Well, we just had Fred on. Hopefully we can ask him and see if it's still stuck in a closet or a cupboard over at Tamiya USA.
What I was impressed by was that when I brought it along to Tamiya USA and they'd actually handed it to them and they'd mounted it beautifully on a base, which I'd never done. They had a bit like one of Stan's exquisite matte black, very stylish bases, and it actually made me think I should do that more with mine. But you know, I mean, I finish a model for the magazine and it goes, I take the pictures, 10 minutes to take the final pictures, and it goes on the shelf and collects dust, or it ends up in the bin, quite frankly. A lot of them just had a whole cupboard full of my models destroyed in an office move.
Oh.
It's a bit upsetting, but then, you know, they've done their job. They've been in the magazine. They've kind of been preserved at the best they'll ever look. I don't have it anywhere to display them at home. It's just physically nowhere. So I guess that's how it is. I do have a lot of models on show at the UK Tamiya Importer, which are based in a town called Milton Keynes here. The hobby company run by absolute diamond of a chap called Peter Binger, and he's got a really, really slick showroom for all of his products, and he's allowed me 2 big IKEA cases, glass cases, for my builds of Tamiya, Italeri, and Dragon Suckers. Those are the model ranges that the plastic kit ranges he imports, plus another one beginning with Z that we shall not mention for the minute. And so they're actually there and they're safe. My 2 Corsairs that I did for my book are there, and a bunch of other stuff that I forget is there. So that's quite nice to know that they're kind of alive and no one can touch them. But
that's awesome.
You know, so yeah, the T55, and then when I actually sat with Tamiya and we were talking about it, sound like I'm name dropping, but it's just what happened.
Humble
his
brag.
English is very, Mr. Tamiya he understands English perfectly. He speaks it okay, but we always managed to communicate. But he had a piece of paper. He drew along sales. I won't do his accent, it's insulting, but he said sales of T55 going very well. I'm like, excellent. He said, your magazine article. Sales. I'm like, oh, okay. And I just wish I had my boss with me then to say, look, all this time I spend building these plastic kits is worth it because it's helping Tamiya, you know. So I'm clinging on to that memory. 20 years, 19 years.
No, man, I wouldn't let it die. So, Marcus, I'm going to monopolize this conversation before I turn it over to my co-host Ivan to pick his favorite build. But one of the other builds that stuck out to me that kind of, again, influenced my style and honestly, again, was ahead of the curve, I think, was your T34 from Dragon, the one that you did in just Russian green. and the way you beat the heck out of it and scratched it all up, tore up the fenders and the exhaust. I think, again, another build that when I think of iconic Marcus Nicholls, that's one that I hold pretty high.
Oh, thank you. It's very kind of you. That was a gift. That kit was a gift from Stan Spooner.
Oh, nice.
He's the most generous, kind-hearted person I can think of. And we were out when I hung out with him for TamiyaCon shows. He would always buy gifts, just lavish everyone with gifts. And he said, "I want to see you build this T-34." And again, it's like a little green Russian tank, and I know nothing about it. I think I did some grill work or something with some photo etch on that. I can't quite remember, but again, frill model tracks from the talented Giuseppe Papato, a frill model who's an amazing eccentric character in the model industry. And yeah, that came out nice. I was using a little Nikon Coolpix camera at the time, which it was a kind of, not even a prosumer, it was a kind of consumer digital camera. But it had that quirk of some of those cameras where you had an incredible close-up ability, but with a wide angle effect. So you could get really close in, amazing depth of field. And I was able to put the model on the surface with the camera sitting on the surface in front of it and just slide it around and take a bunch of pictures. So I got some quite nice low angle shots on that one. But yeah, that's still alive, that model. I think it's up at the Hobby Company showroom as well. So that one lives.
That's great. You know, I just posted a link in the group chat for our listeners and viewers to see. It's got some of your classics builds, two of them, the T55 and T34 are there. And
oh yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to have a collection of images like that because, you know, we have this Facebook group, obviously. I'm sure you're probably aware of our Facebook group. I started about 10 years ago. And then when we tried to become a little bit more social media aware as a company, it became part of our kind of portfolio, if you like. But we've got over 110,000 members in that now. And yeah, it's a promotional tool, like Brett was saying. It's to sell magazines, hopefully, and so I'm able to dive into that collection of images and use it to say buy a subscription or whatever, yeah. And it's just for eye-catching imagery, really. So
yeah, the Tamiya Model Magazine group is absolutely outstanding. I think, you know, in addition to promoting the brand of Tamiya and the magazine itself, I think it's a great place, and more importantly, a positive place that modelers can go and interact. I don't think there's very many controversies in that group, and I appreciate how clean it is and really a tight ship that you and your admins run. It's always been a very welcoming place to modelers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other elements that maybe we'll discuss is what people use scale modeling as a hobby for. And you know, obviously a lot of people, it's nostalgia because they built plastic kits in their youth and wanted a taste of it, and there are obviously showstoppers and competition winning models, and that's great, and we focus on those. But one of the key factors for me, and I've had this expressed to me on numerous occasions, is that people use scale modeling as a kind of therapy for, say, mental health or personal issues or relaxation, but just as a break from stuff. And I've had people speak to me quite emotionally, actually, and say, you know, I was recovering from an illness or an operation, and the magazine kept them from going crazy in the hospital bed. They're rather hard to bringing them the magazine, and they couldn't build at that moment, but they were keeping in touch with it. And so, you know, I'm very aware of the fact that model making. I'll make a big confession here. I absolutely hate any competition in model making. It goes against my ethos of the whole thing. That anyone that can finish a model or even start a model, it's worthy of praise and admiration, and it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to build models. And so, I mean, you know, it's good for lots of people who compete. I've never competed more than entering a couple of models, and that's mainly because I think as soon as you bring an element of competition into it, for some people it takes away the joy of the simple pleasure of just sticking together a model kit in their own time. Obviously different approaches for different people are completely valid, But I'm very aware, and this leads back to the group, keeping the group as squeaky clean as we can, because there are people there with every one of these reasons for wanting to look at building models. They're there to show off their great models. They're there to show off their crappy models, and I love that absolutely as much as anything else. There are people with health issues, people who have disabilities, and it's a place to come where I just will not tolerate people. The one thing that drives me mad is when someone puts a laughy emoji by someone's model, and I boot them out of the group for that. I've booted hundreds of people out just for putting a laugh emoji by someone's work, because that's not what we do in that group. And if someone insults someone model, they're blocked. So it takes work. I've got a good team. I've got John Geigel, who I think you guys may know from Masterpiece Models. A couple of other chaps, got Spencer, John Mock. We keep a very steely eye on the goings on in that group. And if anything gets nasty, they're gone, because that's not what we do in that group. And with 110,000 people, they're very well behaved. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen very often. At the minute, I don't want to go on about this too much, but at the minute we've got the Ukraine situation, and I'm still actually not quite sure how to come down on this, because people are building legitimate models of Soviet art, or old habits, Russian armor and Ukrainian armor with the flags on, and those are just as legitimate as a Third Reich tank or an Israeli Defense Force tank, all these awful oppressors. But we allow them in because it's historical. But having a Ukraine flagged vehicle in the group now instantly sparks debate, political debate. We have zero politics policy in the group, of course. It's difficult because I don't want to stop people talking about things, but so there's a flare point at the minute with that. I'm not quite sure how to deal with that one. But no, people are very well behaved, and I think it's a terrific forum for us to try and flog our funny little magazine, but also to encourage people to stay building models and come join the hobby, because that's what we need. We need people buying model kits, and youngsters, of course, and older guys, everyone, to keep the hobby going, because ultimately we all feed off it. That's whether it's a competitor magazine or whatever. We need people building models, and the Facebook group it seems to work. It's a very easy way to post images, easy to chat with people. So yeah, it seems Facebook. It's like I often think it's like a cross between a pub fight and an open sewer. If you get into the other stuff, but for model makers, I think it's actually really useful. I've connected with scores and scores of great model makers from literally every country you can think of. And got some nice articles as a result,
100%. One of the things I'd love to go back to is the comment you mentioned about the magazine itself, and getting those comments from individuals. The gentleman that said, I had this magazine in the hospital, or it kept me sane. Like, that's very powerful. And
absolutely,
I have a person. Yeah, so I have a personal story I'd share, and then I'm sure Scott and Ivan and Doug probably have one. But for me, the magazine, when I think about growing up, getting into the hobby and visiting shops with my dad, who's no longer here, one of the fondest memories we have, and I can picture it to this day, of walking in the hobby shop and knowing the exact path to the magazine rack and pulling the Tamiya model magazine, the latest issue, and going to buy it. And then, we go grab a burger or, grab a soft drink, because I was like a teenager at the time, and literally plow the magazine. And it was beautiful. So
it's amazing, it kind of, it reminds me of A, how old I am, and B, how long I've been doing this magazine. But it's incredible. I had actually another little nice story that when I was office based many years ago, I had a young guy from London ring up all the time before pre-internet to ask me anything: which airbrush should I buy, which compressor should I buy, all these questions. But it's great, and in the office environment, it's kind of hard to break away from doing the magazine and answer these questions. But he was a lovely guy. Ronnie Wise is his name. And then he went quiet for a few years. Then he came back to me and said, I've been building, I've improved my modeling. Do you want to see them? And this is when we were just being able to start emailing. This is how long it's been. And he sent some of his model pictures, and they were absolutely fantastic. And then a few years later on from that, he had a model in the magazine and on the cover. So I was conversing with him from a pre-teen right up to, and now he is an incredibly talented, I don't actually know what you call it, but he lives in Jerusalem, and he carves these amazing silver works for religious texts in Jerusalem. So it's this amazing, like the Talmud, he's, like silver cases for this stuff. And this kid is a grown-up adult with children himself and still builds models, and we keep in touch. And that's wonderful. I've seen him grow up through Tamiya magazine. It's absolutely extraordinary. So there's that element. And yeah, like I said, I've had numerous people say to me, the magazine really has kept me going. And that sounds really pompous of me. I don't mean it to sound like that, but
I don't think it sounds pompous at all. I mean, you've spoken sort of about how you've shared some great stories about how each modeler is really an individual and expresses their individuality through modeling. And then there's this community aspect. I mean, you've got 110,000 people that all behave, which is almost a miracle.
I know it is. I mean, I'm a member of various groups on Facebook I shouldn't be really, but and the level, and they're all adults, and the level of behavior is just infantile, and I leave them. These are obviously non-modeling groups, I hasten to add, but no, our guys, there's a general level of respect, and you do obviously, like in life, you get people who just can't be very nice, but it kind of self-moderates as well, because others will come in and say, actually no, you're wrong there, but let me show you an example of how you're wrong. Not what you're saying is wrong, but what the fact you stated about this color or that color. And then more often than not, people say, oh, actually, yeah, I didn't know that, thanks. You've informed me, so thank you. Yeah, I mean, I never ever thought that the Facebook group would grow like this. Facebook have changed the rules recently, and it makes it harder to police, because it was a simple case of applying to be a member and then you were in. Now I think anyone can comment until we okay it, and we get a lot of spam, or attempted spam. But it's doable. It's an hour a day, probably, to maybe 2, to interact with that. With the morning tea. I'm English, so I have tea. Ivan, I'm waiting for one of your corrections on English versus American.
No, you've been pretty faultless so far.
No, but and the thing is, with a magazine, I do 2 magazines. I'm probably aware. Like I share the model. Oh God, what's it called? Military Illustrated Modeler. We've got MIMS and MMI and TMMI and MAI, which I think Brett explained amply, that it was an existing magazine that had been going called Military Illustrated, nothing to do with modeling. Actually, some really quite interesting stories. It was literally from the ancients right up to modern day, but it was old school. We bought it and decided to convert it into a modeling magazine, because magazines we have news agents here selling, I'm sure you're aware of those. And getting a slot on a shelf in a newsagent is a little bit like landing slot at an airport, in that it doesn't really matter what plane or airline lands in it, but there's a window of opportunity that you can use with your plane. And it's a little bit like that with a magazine, in that there's a slot available. We don't want to lose it because they're hard to get. So we fill that slot. We're not going to close that magazine. We decided to develop it into a kind of slightly upper end title with good quality paper. It's more expensive. Not in any way copying AFE model, although the perception is that we did, but that was absolutely never our intention to do that at all. I have great respect for Dave Parker and Mark Neville, the beautiful magazine, great modelers, and credit where it's due. It's a stunning production, and we just had this slightly offbeat opportunity to produce this mag. Where was I going with that? See, I told you, tangent. But no, I do these 2 mags, share with Brett, and yeah, and it's a lot of pages a month. Do you know what I mean? To show models in, and oh no, I remember now. Sorry, yeah, I'm going back on myself. That modeling MIM mag is a kind of coffee table. We came up with a bookazine, which is just one of those disgusting words that I hate. I'm going to have to go and have a shower now I've said it, but it's not really a community. What it is, it's a showcase of great models, where I can, a little bit of historical stuff in there. But with the Tamiya model magazine, we've got more kind of community type stuff. So we've got my little page at the back. I was on furlough for 2 years with COVID, so I wasn't editing that magazine. It was completely taken care of by Brett and my boss Alan, so I didn't have my editor's page for a long time, but I'm back now with that, and it's my little bit of opinion on things if I can get something in there. And then the reviews, we try and put a little bit of humor in, toying with having a letters page again, believe it or not. I know it sounds like an old concept, or maybe best comments off the Facebook group or something like that, but I'd like to have a bit more crossover with the magazine and the Facebook community there. And I think a magazine it's a little bit like a little community, that a little bit of home, that it arrives on the same day each month, and same format. There's a comfort and familiarity with it, but with new content, and you build up loyalty that way. And we've got an extremely loyal following, luckily for us. So yeah, I think it's very important, and you know, community in the modeling world is very evident when you look at Telford, and the US Nats shows. Everyone knows each other. It's absolutely extraordinary. You know, it's like a gathering of like minds. You know.
Oh, for sure. I mean, model shows are the penultimate, you know, social environment for scale modelers. And, you know, going back to what you said, I think you had mentioned the magazine and Facebook. I think they do play well together. And what's awesome to see is, you know, you're pulling people from social media, putting them into print. And I think that's incredibly motivating for people. Hell, it is for me, to be honest. You know, there's something special about like seeing
back
yourself.
engineering, doesn't it? You know, we're going from a high-tech medium, beautiful LCD screens and Retina laptops and all of this, and then we're putting them on mashed up paper, you know, and it's kind of seems a bit of backwards, but I think there's something nice. Loads of our guys tell me all the time, you know, they've got the digital edition, which we sell, they've got it on their phone, they've got it on their PC and whatever, but they like a paper magazine because you can roll it up and take it into the lavatory with you. You can read it on a train. You don't need an internet service. You can read it under the bedclothes with a torch if you really like it, you know. And so it's such a simple equation. It's a £5. Desperately trying to keep it under a £5, but everything's becoming more expensive. But you know, it's a psychological. It's like the old $4.99 thing. You know what I mean? It's like, it's gone up a penny. But and it's just so simple. It's just such a simple thing. You can walk into a news agent, a bookseller here, and pick up a magazine. You can flick through it. If there's something in it that you fancy, buy it. If not, next month. You know. And that's it. That's the kind of contract that, and you know, it's worked. There's a lot of magazines coming out of Britain. We've always published lots of hobby magazines. It's kind of something that we just do. And you know, they've dropped off the twig one by one over the years, which is awful to see. Even though they're rivals, I do not ever rejoice when a magazine goes under, because it's, you know, it could happen to anyone. And Spencer's Military and Scale, I always thought was a terrific production. I'm absolutely overjoyed to have him as a staff model maker, as Brett was saying. He's a fantastic builder, very creative, very imaginative, and it's lovely to have him on board. And he's a great guy to know as well. Very, very clever chap. So it's an honour to have him on board. But yeah, and it's, you know, when I started in the early 90s, we had Angus Crichton. Do you remember him?
Oh, fantastic modeler.
I mean, just extraordinary. He lives only a 20-minute drive from me, and I haven't seen him for years. I was going to see him before Christmas, and then he got COVID, and then it's March. So, you know, go figure. but he was building armor models to a level at a time that I don't think not many others were doing. Very much his style, very much his approach to doing things, but this was way before aftermarket ever really was a thing. I mean, there were a couple of companies, Grant Line, do you remember the model railway?
Grant Line bolts.
Yeah, and he used those. There was a Japanese company called The Show Modeling, and one of those typical Japanese Englishy names, and they were a very early producer of photo etch parts for armor. They were fantastic. It's probably still are. You could definitely still use that stuff. And that was kind of it. So what he was the king of plasticard. I mean, my goodness, that guy could still can make things with plasticards with the references to hand. He could produce stuff in plasticard that you just wouldn't believe.
Yeah,
and he was so nonchalant about it as well. He was, the least egotistical person I've ever met. He was just like, and he would sit there with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And then when he put the paint in his airbrush, he put it in his mouth, pour it that while he's building the model, he'd have his airbrush in his mouth. And I'd sit there, and he's also a taxidermist or taxidermist, I'm not sure. So he had a living owl that lived in his shed with him, plus stuffed examples of animals all throughout his house. And the owls did swoop down once and grab one of his armor models in its talons. So that owl is now stuffed.
Speaking of Angus Crichton,
oh, yeah,
his classic book. This still holds up today. It's even got the little Tamiya badge on
part
it.
one.
Yeah, part one. I look forward to part two.
I have zero right to comment on Angus's 20-year gap between parts 1 and 2 because I've got a book in that's supposed to. I promised 3 years ago. Then we had COVID, and I used that as a long kind of rolling excuse. I'm absolutely ashamed that I haven't produced it, but it's the one on the how to build on the P38 Lightning. It's almost ready. I'm this close to thing. I'm just going to do it on the existing models, and then Tamiya go ahead and announce the J, which we knew about when they were doing the FMG. Because model companies tend to tool up all the parts for a model and then release them over time. They don't tend to go back and make new bits. The J was probably tooled years ago, and now I'm wondering if I should include the J in the book just to bring it up to date and make it something to sell. But it's kind of a never-ending thing. That if Alan, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I doubt you're watching. You've got a life, but. But yeah, I have no right to comment on Angus's long gap between his parts 1 and 2 on the Tiger, and kind of the irony now actually, because that was the Tamiya Tiger, and in that time, there's far superior Tiger ones have come out, of course. So if we did a part 2, it would have to include everything: Dragon, Ryefield, Tacom, whoever, because those kits. Inevitably are superior. I mean, I think the Tamiya Tiger was 89. I think that's when it first came out.
Yeah, it's a classic. I mean, it kind of, it was the jump. It was the jump that Tamiya really took, I think, in terms of quality. And
it's one of those ones where if someone says to me, I want to build a tank kit, which do you recommend? Apart from the interleave road wheels, I would say Tiger 1, it's just the box, really. The Tamiya kit goes together pretty nicely. Still, molds haven't worn out, it's one of those standards. It's a bit like the M113 that Tamiya made years ago. I think everyone should build one as a kind of sorbet between courses. Do you know what I mean? It's like I can build an M113 in an hour and a half, and I don't have to paint it. It's just something I can do. Like, right, I've finished a model. Right now, I'm going to go back to my 32nd scale B17 or whatever, that's going to take forever. But I mean, we do these how to build books as you show there. We've got quite a few of them now for sale. We try to do one on every significant new Tamiya kit that comes out. We're definitely trailing in that regard. But Spencer's done one. I think is that Spencer's you have there. His armor one. It's terrific. You can see his
the leopard.
Wonderful model work in that one.
And then you had a spit in this one.
Yeah. We did one in the Revell Spitfire. We got there. I can't lose track of what we've done now. They're fairly short run books, so we sell out. We need to do reprints. The Mustang one is totally sold out. But yeah, I would like to do more, but I don't think my boss will ever have me do one again.
How has the digital market affected the magazine? I mean, I have to assume that a lot of your readers are consuming your product digitally now, as opposed to just the paper books. But how's it affected business overall?
Well, it's interesting because we kind of when the internet, the internet's been going for a long time, obviously, but there have been certain kind of changes of gear when you kind of think, oh, they can do that now. Like when you could get proper high resolution imagery through when broadband really came along, because you can't really do anything on dial-up, but when faster internet speeds became a thing, people could suddenly get nice quality pictures, nice quality pictures on their computers, and we were worried, and it could wipe us out, but actually it didn't. Of course, it takes a chunk out of anything because we're a kind of old-fashioned industry in some ways, but it's kind of come to complement us. So we have a official digital edition of the magazine that people subscribe to, obviously much less expensive than the printed edition. And it's quite nice because the pictures are zoomable, so it actually has some advantages over a paper edition. But with the advent of social media, which has been, I think, terrific for model making on the whole, we can promote the mags that way. And yeah, like I said before, there is something nice about having a wad of paper in your hand with nice color pictures, big pictures, and also a complete story. Because one of the things that I still find a little bit on, let's say, blogs, not so much videos, but you don't, the story that model builds can ramble on and on and on for an interminable amount of time, and you don't, it can take weeks to get to the conclusion of someone's model build. And it can be, I find that a little bit frustrating. With the magazine, it's all in one package. We try not to do two-parters. Having said that, we've got a two-parter at the minute, but I think 2 months is as long as anyone should have to wait to get the complete article. But overwhelmingly, you've got standalone readable pieces, captions, like again Brett was saying, the crucial nature of captions for pictures, because lots of people will flick through, look at the pictures, and then come back and read the captions on the pictures, and then finally read the copy, the actual write-up on it when they've got more time. But no, I think that there's still very much a place for the printed magazine in the hobby world at the minute. We've tried to adapt, but our readers are generally kind of old codgers like me, so not exclusively, of course. And they're used to a magazine. They like the continuity of it. We sell binders. We sell lots of binders for the mags, and people keep them. They can't stand to miss one. If the postman drops it in the puddle on the way to posting it to them, they get pretty panicky. And so we always replace that for free if the postman's destroyed it, and so they can have this immaculate condition. Lots of people have double subscriptions, so they just have a spare copy just in case. It's we love that. But yeah, I think that we try and use digital. You can't treat it as an enemy because it's it's like trying to hold back the waves. So I try and integrate the two things as well as I can. Sadly, a lot of some people on the Facebook group don't even realize that we are a magazine, an actual magazine. So I try and emphasize that occasionally with my silly little posts that I hope people find funny and don't think I'm a complete idiot.
Not a bookazine though.
Not a bookazine, no. Otherwise, it could venture into the world of edutainment. All these words. Ivan, come on.
Well, one thing. Oh, I think we've got the echo back, haven't we? There we are. One thing, going back to kind of what you said, although a lot of the subscribers to the magazine absolutely love a physical copy, I know myself, JB, and TJ, we've all contributed to these magazines under the Doolittle umbrella. It's also your contributors who love having that physical print and being like, that's mine. It's like, it's cool seeing it on a screen, but when you've got it, it's like, that's me in print. It's there.
Absolutely. And I am I feeding back still?
No, you could.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
Little details that I love, the fact that in the UK every single thing that is published that's a serial print a copy of it has to go into the British Library. Every single, whether it's a book, magazine, everything has to be recorded in the British Library. So every one of my magazines, perfect condition, has been buried in the bowels of the British Library in King's Cross in London, and they have tens of millions of publications in there. And for anyone can go and check it out just to make sure it happened. And I quite like that. I like the fact that there's a kind of legacy of these mags out there in people's collections, and they can show their mates. Absolutely no problem about someone taking the latest issue to the model club and handing it around. It might, if it encourages one extra person to buy a copy, then that's all good. And actually having that mag is quite a nice thing, I think. Tangible. It's so simple,
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm just stoked to hear that my work's in the British Library. I think, I think I'm good. I've made something that's worth keeping around.
Who knew? I know exactly. We're immortal. I don't know where exactly they keep it. Probably in the loos or something. Bazalget's famous London sewer system is probably lined with these magazines. I don't know, but I think it does still, even with all the things that have happened to media over the recent years, I think that it still lends, hopefully at least, an air of credibility to something, that an editor somewhere has said, yes, that's good enough for publication. And it goes through the slightly convoluted process of publishing it. I mean, Brett was describing, how an article comes to fruition, and it used to be a case of someone sending in sometimes handwritten reviews, then later typewriter written reviews, and we would use OCR. Do you remember OCR? Optical character recognition software. So you would scan this piece of paper, and it would make it almost into English. Which you then had to reread and retype, and then we'd put it on a floppy disk in the post, and it would go off to a typesetter who would then send back the next day or the day after sheets of A4 paper with the article in columns of solid text in the right typeface, the right size, column width. That would be then handed to the designer, who would physically cut that up into strips and then use a wax machine to stick it down onto a bigger piece of paper. And that's how I started with the magazine. It was an absolutely antiquarian process. It was only a few steps up from letterpress, really. And then we got all modern, and we had a single internet line that overnight you could send 3 photographs to the printers. Then we had these big removable hard drives that we would physically wrap in bubble wrap and send to our typesetters, who are in Cornwall of all places. Is very convenient, 250 miles away. And then obviously now it's all just WeTransfer. That is the advent of WeTransfer is an absolute miracle of science, quite frankly. If they start charging for the free service, then I'm in a world of hurt. But the way it's progressed is extraordinary. It's and I can run the whole magazine from this laptop here. So. And then we we still put all that technology and make a little paper booklet out of it. Seems a bit bonkers, but like we said, people like it. I hope.
I remember. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. No, please.
I remember back in 2016, I published a Subaru I built onto the Tamiya pitch. And you sent me a message saying, I want this in the magazine. And I was blown away by that. I was like, whoa, this is the big deal.
I remember it.
Do you still approach people with this in the same manner? You see a build you like and just be like, hey, I want this for the magazine. Would you be up for that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's when I'm not actually putting the magazines, putting them together, but processing the text and the imagery and picking the ones I want. Yeah, well, one of my key roles is to find people that want to write for me. They're either experienced, they've done it before, and so they know the score with it, or they're completely green, they're completely new, and it's just a beautiful model. Yet again, just to mention Brett's chat, obviously it's got to be a good model, but the next main thing is the photography. We can't publish rubbish photographs. You can do so much with them in Photoshop, but they need to be well lit, good depth of field, all the usual things, taken with a camera that can produce files of at least 2 megabytes in size. I know it's a kind of very rough measure of it, but a lot of cameras now can take raw images, Canon RAW or Nikon or whatever. I always like to have those because that gives me the most flexibility. Gosh, where was I going with that one? I've lost my thread again. But no, I do. I'm attracted, obviously, to a beautiful model, but it's got to be great pictures. The writing we can always work with. That's the most malleable thing. So I actually prefer people to write in their native language, and then I run it through Google Translate, because that's getting the AI in that is getting better and better all the time. And if people who can write a bit of English write it in English, but only semi-English, then unpicking that is a real chore. It's a real chore, and it'll convert Japanese. I've had Finnish text, Russian for sure, and Google just takes it in its stride. It's absolutely extraordinary, and that can always be polished up. Can always beef out the text, but always on the lookout for new writers, keeping it fresh, new styles, new inspirations that people are getting. Got I'm going to get his name wrong, but Daniel. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to look. He's an American modeler. I think he's in South Carolina, but he's got this terrific article. Daniel Buchmeyer, maybe he's listening. He did this piece.
Oh yeah,
in our MIM magazine, based on a famous. I don't know if that's clear or not.
Yep.
Picture of 2 African American artillerymen, and they'd written, Easter eggs for Hitler on the thing, and he's very interested in getting the history of in this case African American GIs. He's just finishing a piece on the liberation of one of the camps in the Second World War. So there's a kind of an embrace with 2 figures. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's very emotional, and he's going at it from a very evocative point of view. So I like all that. I love things with personal stories or personal reasons to do that model, right down to just a basic build because someone liked the color of something. It's all valid. That's me, by the way. I like the color of it. I'm the kind of I'm the simpleton at the end of it. It's just, what did you build? Why did you paint it that color? Well, I like the color, and I add loads of it. So it's a bit like Picasso's blue period. They will overanalyze why he painted in blue. He just had loads of blue paint. So it's like, but no, there's all sorts of different motivations from our contributors as to why they build a specific model a certain way. Maybe a grandfather flew in a bomber in the war or something. I'm very keen to get my hands on this new TACOM V1 and the ramp, because my dad was nearly killed by one in the Second World War. He wasn't evacuated from the East End of London, and these things were dropping all around from July the 13th, I believe, 44. And my aunts, good old East End matronly aunts, would send him out in the street saying, "Brian, what is it? Is it one of ours?" And he's like, "No, it's a V1. Get back in. It's a buzz bomb." Everyone calls them doodle bugs, but they were all called buzz bombs by the Londoners then. And and he would see these things come down and dive into a doorway. So I kind of want to make that as a tribute to my dad. My dad died 10 years ago in May, actually, unfortunately, on May the 4th. So the May the 4th be with him. And I'd like to kind of do one as a little bit of not a tribute to him, because it's a thing that tried to kill him, but just with it in my mind, with historical stuff. So that's my kind of emotional motivation, I suppose, with these things.
I'd love to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't really get tack on easily now, so I might have to just buy that one. It'd be fun to put together. And there's a real one. I think there's at least real ramp at Duxford Museum here in the UK. So that would be quite fun in a kind of slightly sick way.
Well, Scale Model Craft has a question for you. How do you feel about dioramas? They good for the model, or do they pull attention away from the subject?
It all depends on how well they're done. I think that, to me, I suppose, I mean, I build a bit of everything, as you probably know, but I suppose my kind of my bedrock of modeling is military models, military vehicles, and I think a good diorama tells the story. It tells the complete story. You've got figures in there. I'm an awful figure painter. That's something I really need to work on. But I think that, in a way, they're the things that absolutely bring life to any armored vehicle. So, the Tamiya figures that have been doing recently are absolutely terrific. They used to be just the usual blobs of plastic, but now they've been doing this scanning technology or something that I don't understand. But the figures are very good, and if you can pull them off, it totally brings a model to life. And again, we've had models recently in Military Illustrated magazine, one from a chap in Spain who did an M5A1 Stuart with this amazing American crew in Italy. The most characterful faces. I wonder if I can find that without having to disappear for too long here. I'm never going to find it, am I? But no, so to answer the question, yeah, I love dioramas. I've built a few, greater or lesser success. My favourite one that I did, which I don't know, you may remember, was the Tamiya Matilda 2. And it was in a little scene supposedly being tested around the outside of a factory in the UK before it was kind of sent off. So there's a kind of barbed wire fence and a little kid with a catapult who had fired a blob of painty something at the tank. And there's a British policeman kind of talking to him. And I think that's probably my favourite and most successful one. It's just a small scene because it tells a story. And that's when you go from a skillful build of an armor model to actually then presenting it in a scene. It absolutely can transform it because it shows you the environment that they were in, obviously, what the crews look like, stowage and the buildings. You can identify a diorama very quickly if it's done properly from the buildings that are around it as to where it was set. Italian buildings look very different to German buildings, to French buildings, if we're talking World War II. So yeah, I love them, and I've been focusing very heavily on them in MIM mag. I keep going on about that, but that's my kind of premium mag, really, with the better paper and bigger pictures, less text. Just let the images do the talking. I had some terrific dioramas from people. Bernard Lustig, may remember him, not remember him, he's still building models, but he's one of my absolute favourite model artists. Like I said, Les Plaskett, and scores of other great builders. Absolutely fantastic stuff.
Have you seen Spencer's Legacy Collection books as well?
I actually haven't got any of them because he keeps forgetting to send me a copy, but it's literally that. But no, his legacy stuff is terrific, and he's I'm sure he visited Francois Verlinden when he was still trading in his place in Missouri, and it was no question that Francois relit the kind of the torch for many of us builders when he was doing his stuff in the 80s. And yeah, Spencer's work in that kind of Verlinden-y style, intentionally Verlinden-y style, is still wonderful to look at. It's very pleasing on the eye, But then there's a modeler called, I'm going to get his name wrong, but Imad Boantoun, who's in Lebanon, and he's being published by Père Plat, I think, his dioramas, and those are much more modern style, gritty, beautifully finished. Just I wouldn't know where to start, quite frankly. The sheer quantity of stuff, a building and a groundwork and a vehicle is achievable, but when you have to have 300 little pieces of other stuff just to contextualize it, that takes time. And as we all know, with model making, the smaller the detail, the more importance it carries. That's why so many models are messed up in the last 1% of its build stage. And my models I'm talking about, putting the wire on the aerial wire on a model aircraft. If you get that wrong, if it looks like a piece of dental floss sat out there on a Spitfire, it's going to look dreadful, But so you've got to get those things perfect, and you can get away with things much larger flaws if the fine details look great. Then you definitely can distract from other things. That's what I've been getting away with it for a long time. So But yeah, sorry to answer the question. Yeah, love dioramas, want more, definitely. Just I wish I had the space to do them.
Stan wants to know if you're wearing pants.
No, I'm totally naked from the waist down.
All right.
I will be standing up in 45 seconds, so just cut. Hey, Stan. Love you. Yeah, Stan's a wonderful guy. His models are just stunning. And as I said, one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met. So he's just an absolute golden block of a guy in this hobby. Great advocate for it. And one of the lovely things with the magazine is I've had the opportunity to do quite a lot of travel, which is a real treat. So I've gone to places that I never would have dreamed of going. Certainly Japan 6 or 7 times, I suppose. US scores of times. Europe all over. Even the Philippines, the model car club thing there. So yeah, and everywhere you go, there are modelers. It's absolutely extraordinary. There are modelers in places you wouldn't believe. Someone sent me a picture of himself reading my magazine in a penthouse apartment on Copacabana Beach, and I'm like, I was simultaneously impressed but like outraged. Like, what are you doing? Reading a model magazine? You should be out there drinking cold beer and looking at girls in Brazilian bikinis and things. You're crazy. I've got modelers in Iraq, places that you'd think. I mean, just for the ill-informed, you'd think, my God, how could you relax enough in some of these places to sit down and build a model? But no, and it's testament to the fact that people use modeling as a kind of safety valve in a way, to unwind and to express their imagination, interest in history, and that applies not just to armor and military subjects, but cars too. Some of the guys building historic race cars, you can almost smell the fuel fumes, from these, like Ebro, the model company Ebro, making these historic Lotuses, and it's just wonderful. These kits are just exquisite. So if you can dabble in it. This is the thing with the wonder of Tamiya Model Magazine is that it isn't a single topic mag. So if I get sort of a bit fed up with green tanks, I can go and do a bright orange McLaren and end up hating gloss paints so much that I just rush back to my matte paints all in one go, so not true.
Yeah, you mentioned the plethora of subjects in Tamiya Model Magazine. I think one of them that stood out to us lately, and TJ and Scott had the opportunity to see it at a local show, was Brian Kreiner's Natural Metal P40. Oh my gosh.
It's absolutely stunning. And again, Brian is a great friend. All these great models are incredibly modest, and not one modeler who's ever told me how great his model is has had a great model. I can put my hand on the heart. If someone says you've got to come and see this model, you're going to want to publish it. I know I'm not going to want to publish it right there on the spot with never having seen it. And so Brian and Stan and guys like this are the complete opposite of that. They're very modest. They just say, look, I've been doing this, struggling with it a bit. And they show me a picture. And I'm like, you're struggling, right? This is just exquisite. And what Brian does with natural metal finishes on aircraft is amazing. And that P40, it really deserved to go into Brett's MIM magazine on the nicer paper, because he does the aviation edition. But I wanted it for myself. So, and you can see the weathering, the staining that he's done on that thing. Brian's published a few of his models with Tony Canfora's what they call Wingspan, I think, books. And again, just he did a Dornier 335 file, and wow, it's just an incredible piece of tapestry. It's just wonderful. Absolutely love it. No, he's a great guy. I'd love to see it in person. Brian comes to London maybe every couple of years, and I'm going to get him to bring a model for me one time. Donate.
Yeah, he lives about 20 minutes away from me, so he's super close.
John?
I'm sorry, say again, you were muted?
Did you move?
Yeah. So I live in Pennsylvania
recently.
Yep. I was in Pennsylvania and moved across the country to Colorado for a job.
Brian and I probably chat with Brian more than anyone else on a daily basis, because he comes on Skype just about an hour before I finish for the day here, and we always have we've got the sense of humor of 9-year-olds, so we always have this kind of puerile chat. And he's just a great guy. He's very, very talented, but incredibly modest. He's really just how it should be, I think. But yeah, no, I'd love to see his P40 in the flesh. Just wonderful. Yeah, wonderful stuff.
Yeah,
he's got a couple more on the bench for me as well at the minute. So he's going to do the Tamiya 32nd scale Korean War Mustang, which is just going to be. I can picture how good that thing's going to look. A couple other things.
Yeah, at the show he also brought his MiG-15, and it is absolutely astounding as well.
He's got a real touch, and everyone thinks of him as the natural metal finish guy, but actually he's only done a fairly small number of purely NMF finishes on aircraft. But he's he just picked up that kind of good reputation because he's very good at them. But his other stuff is fantastic too. And I remember seeing his workshop. I visited him. He lived in West Covina in Los Angeles, and I visited him when he was living there. And he had all these dental scalpels because he's a big advocate of this oil canning effect, this kind of warped stress skin effect on aircraft. And he was doing it with these tiny, teeny little dental scalpels. And I still never managed to get my hand on one of those blades, and it's the only way to do it. And he polishes it out. Oh man, no, just fantastic stuff. More from him. His last model was I'm going to say Hobby Boss 32nd scale P61 Black Widow, which I think he did in 2 parts, as I remember, in the mag. And again, it's just absolute masterpiece, that thing. So good. I don't know where he puts these 32nd scale builds. Huge. Certainly a P61. But I know he's building a B-17, the Hong Kong model's B-17 as well. At least one of those. So I think he's got a fairly decent sized basement where he does his stuff. But yeah, no, these characters, as I said, the travel I've had, I've met some great guys, loads and loads of models in the States. I love coming to the States because people are much more vocal, willing to chat openly about their modeling stuff. I suppose we're a little bit more, just different attitude in the UK. It's just a different mindset, and that's for everything. I'm sure Ivan, you'll agree with that. We go to the USA and everyone is just wants to talk and talk and talk about what you did, how you did it, and it's wonderful to actually have that. I've been asked. I did a couple of demos at the Squadron Eagle Quest show in Texas a few times, and absolutely terrifying doing a model demo in front of people when I don't know what I'm doing, never mind trying to tell people what I'm doing. So it's but it's nice. People sit there and listen to you. It's amazing. It's the only place I ever get that, where people sit down and actually listen to me because I'm building models.
Well, I'm going to test your memory out. So my first model that you built that really inspired me, man, it's going to be like 2009, 2010. You built a Fine Molds Type 89 that you posted in Missing Links.
Yes.
And I don't know if you remember that, but that was
Very
a
clearly.
tank that I thought the weathering on it was so great. You did some chipping and then some dust, and it just really looked just.
That kit was initially a part work that came with Model Graphics magazine or Armor Modeling magazine out of Japan over a series of issues. So you get a sprue every other month. I think it was I can't remember if it's monthly or bi-monthly. And I got in touch with them, and they very kindly sent me the whole thing, because it's impossible to build one of these things when you just get a sprue a month. So I put that one together, and I just didn't know how to treat that kit, because I was terrified by that Japanese camouflage with the yellow line. And thought
with
of painting
sun
yellow over
camouflage.
dark greens, it's just going to look like someone's thrown a load of custard over it. It's going to look awful. And I toyed with painting it all yellow and then masking that off, and then just like you've got a nice bright yellow. I just did not know what to do with that one, so I think I painted it in a kind of navy grey, which I hope existed at some point. But I think it's easier to do weathering effects on a single colour vehicle. I think for me anyway, one of the hardest camouflage schemes to weather is the German 3-colour scheme, because you're working over 3 completely different colours with one coloured weathering product. So that's why I always end up covering everything in dust washes, because that you can just go across everything with that. But the Type 89 is one of those ones that was in a lovely metal cupboard in our old photography studio that was then picked up and moved sideways, and ended up it's in crumbs. Unfortunately, that one, this is a bit of a shame.
That's too bad.
I've got all the crumbs, so in theory I could I could glue it back together, but that was a shame. It's a shame. Yeah, no, thanks for remembering that one. Gosh.
Well, it took me until 2022, but I actually have that kit, all the editions of it and everything. But
because they did release it as a standalone kit, didn't they? Eventually, because it was a Fine Molds model, I think.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. I got
a company I love. I love Fine Molds kits. They met the proprietor several times. A tiny company. Probably hate me for saying that, but they are. And the proprietor is an absolutely wonderful guy. He had the Star Wars contract for years, making the Fine Mold Star Wars kits were just exquisite. And then some quite esoteric Japanese aircraft, and then some really beautiful little Japanese tank kits. I just, it's one of my favorite companies actually. There's a delicacy to their products that I really love. And then Stan really wanted the Type 89 as well, so I had a second set of those sprues that came with the magazine, so he's got those somewhere. So next time you speak to Stan, you can nag him to build that one.
There you go. Will do. Well, you've talked a little bit about that V1. What are maybe 2 or 3 other subjects that just for Marcus, not necessarily for the magazine, that intrigue you that you might want to tackle?
Absolutely. I'm like I think I said before we came on. I'm a bit of the ultimate kind of kid in a candy store, where my eyes, if it's physically possible for my eyes to be bigger than my belly, which I don't think it is, but they are. So I see something, and instantly I'm in love with the model subject. I'll see. There are very few subjects that really don't inspire me at all. That I can see the potential in so many things. Revell. Because I'm actually not directly from London, but my entire family are, and I've got a real attachment to London. And Revell did a 24 scale London bus, which I used to travel on when I was hanging out in London through my younger years, and it's huge. They're about to reissue it with a ton of photo etch, so I really would like to do that one, because I can look at that model and I can smell the inside of that bus. It's when you could smoke on buses upstairs, so there's a slight smoky smell. There's chewing gum on the floor and newspapers all over the place. And I would just love to do one just as I remember them in the 80s, coming back from nightclubs and stuff. So that's one I'd love to do. But to be honest, I do get things I really want to do, but I suppose the nature of the work over the years means that I have to be able to turn my hand fairly quickly to a new subject that comes in, even if it isn't something that sets my hair on fire, and just get into it. And I usually find that dig out a couple of books, look online, find a few nicely done model examples that I can get excited by the subject reasonably easily. If there's something that's like, oh, it's got that finish, so there's I'm trying to think of an example, but like a nice metallic finish that, what I love about some of those late war Shermans is that bare bit of metal at the base of the barrel for the recoil. And so that's the bit that excites me about that subject. Isn't it silly? But I'm not very good at olive drab. I think the M18 is probably my most successful olive drab. But again, I don't know what to do with this thing. I just cover it in dust. So I need little nuggets of excitement that I see in a subject that I know that I can do, and bring it to life. And hopefully then that kind of spreads throughout the model and I get inspired for long enough to finish the flipping thing. So there's not been too many models that I built for the mag that I just literally went through the motions with. They probably show, but no, enjoyed. And the McLaren I did, who's up here? I won't stand up because I've got no trousers on, don't forget. But that was a brand new Tamiya kit, first Tamiya car I built in years, and I chose probably one of their most complex car kits to do as a foot back into cars, which is really a bit silly of me, because I mean, even though it's a Tamiya, the engineering, people do criticize Tamiya for their subject matter sometimes can be a little bit predictable, or maybe, dare I say, even a bit dull at times. And they can be a bit random. They'll get you up to the point of another version and then just leave you hanging forever or for a long time. But one thing you know that they're going to be engineered really beautifully. And so, and I knew that building this car would be a fun build exercise. I think that the McLaren Senna was actually a pretty ugly car. I've changed my opinion since having built it, but actually really enjoyed that one, because the whole mindset to building a car like that is totally and utterly different to building a piece of armor. It's as different, I think, you can be within scale modeling. Literally almost every single part of that has to be painted separately, or I should say individually. And so I bought a forest of little bamboo barbecue skewers, and a wad of blue tack, so everything was mounted like this. It's a learning. It's quite a learning exercise, actually. Definitely the London bus. Then I would say is something personally I'd love to do. The V1 again for my kind of dad reasons, that would be fun, and a bunch of other stuff that I kind of look through and think, I definitely want to build one of these Tamiya Phantoms. Haven't had a chance to do that yet, and the aftermarket stuff is building up for that nicely. So I might put one of those together with the Edward seats, and you don't really need any of that stuff. It's absolutely beautiful, but Edward, I do like these 3D printed things now. Even though I look at it and I'm like, I don't understand how this works. This is this is alien technology coming down from somewhere, but I appreciate what people are doing with it, and it's getting better and better. It's almost daily, it seems, that the quality goes up and the price comes down. It's like digital cameras. When they first came out, they were hugely expensive and awful, but as the quality increases, the price comes down. It goes mass market, and it seems. I mean, you've just got a new printer, haven't you, Ivan?
Yes.
It's and it's I would like to play with that, I guess, at some stage. But the new Phantom definitely would like to do, because love that plane. I was going to show you a picture of myself sitting in the cockpit of a Hunter at the age of about 3, with my dad sort of holding me above the seat from an air show. So it was about 1968 or something like this. I haven't got the picture with me, but I almost look cute in that. So I wouldn't mind building a Hunter at some stage. Maybe put a little me in hovering above the ejector seat there or something. But no, I mean, pretty broad-minded when it comes to model subjects. I have a go at pretty much anything, I suppose, except tiger meats. I said it. I wasn't going to say what subjects I don't like, but tiger meat. Jets done up with tiger meat.
I agree.
I don't get it, but there you go. Lots of people love those.
Doesn't
mean I won't put them in the magazine, but it won't be me building them.
No, I agree there. But speaking of subjects, what would be your magnum opus? The model doesn't even have to exist. If you could have a kit of anything in the world and you would build it, what would it be?
Goodness me. Maybe it's a little bit obscure, very obscure actually, but when I was tooling around in London as a teenager, trying to be cool, there's an area of London called Kensington. And back in those days, it used to be quite scruffy, and there was I don't know what you'd call it. I guess it was built in the Victorian age as a market, a multi-floored market for traders. And it was just full. It was every single British tribe you can imagine: punks, skinheads, mods, goths before goths. And it was just this bustling, crazy place. And I would love to almost do like a doll's house type thing where it's all lit, full of hundreds of figures, all the different stalls selling all their T-shirts with anarchy symbols on, and just like a little miniature version of something that I used to love hanging around at, just with all these characters, these crazy people that were hanging around in the kind of punk or post-punk days. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of an odd thing to say, but sort of to construct. And I see some of these dioramas that these guys build with these interiors with hundreds of figures. Maran van Gils, with these naval things he does with all the figures on the ships, have just absolutely blown me away. And I could sit
insane
hours, and so that kind of thing is, if I had the time and the space, it doesn't cost any money really to do it, and if you've got references and imagination, you can make absolutely anything out of scrap. So yeah, something like that would be great. I would love to do like a building full of people, all lit, all weathered up. Or one of these post-apocalyptic scenes. That's another thing I'm going to do. I just bought over 100 quid worth of those Alternity miniatures figures, the resin ones. So I will be doing a zombie post-apocalypse kind of gas masking type thing soon.
Nice.
So yeah, loads of ideas, none of which ever get a chance to actually come to fruition. Because to me, it'll release something, I'm like, better build it, or it goes to Spencer, Similar with the P38J, I think that probably Spencer will do a better job with that than me. But again, I love that aircraft. I think in silver, with the really cool nose art and markings that they had, and really weathered, those beautiful white oxide streaks down from the turbochargers on the tops. Just, it looks so cool. It's such a great looking plane. I massively prefer American aircraft to British. I know, heresy.
Ooh.
Just more interesting looking. The Spitfire, I'm legally obliged to adore the Spitfire because I'm an Englishman.
You swore an oath.
But ideologically prefer the Hurricane because they were usually flown by the working class sergeant officers, sergeant pilots, sorry. But no, I like the ugliness of the Hurricane. And my, favourite subjects, probably my favourite aircraft is maybe a B-24 Liberator. It's just such a handsome looking plane. Massive radial engine US aircraft. Just absolutely love that stuff. So yeah, got some weird tastes. Weird tastes for sure. But I just would like Tamiya to do them because I've kind of passed the point where I want to fight a kit. I love the idea of a beautiful kit that I can build and paint and make and add to it rather than having to correct. Do you know what I mean? Which is incredibly lazy, and people would probably call me an assembler, but that's fine. I don't mind. Try and put I start putting little bits of detail in, like the Hellcat. I had some great pictures from Chris Toadman Hughes. Chris, fantastic guy. Loads of shots of the interior of that thing with cabling and stuff, and I suddenly looked at the date and realized I had like 3 days to finish the model, and I was putting all this lead wire inside the hull, and I thought I just got to stop. So it's actually only detailed inside on one side, much to my shame. So, but you can't see that really now on it. So there you go. But yeah, another Hellcat would be nice. I'd like to do a Serbian Hellcat with these funky, dotty kind of post-impressionist kind of camouflage on, but with all the aftermarket on it, because there's some nice aftermarket coming for that now. The headlight guards are a bit too thick on the standard kit, so to put some thin ones on that would absolutely transform it. But yeah, endless subject ideas, aren't there? I'm sure you guys have that. You know, you've got all these ideas bubbling around in your heads, and actually making them happen is a whole other thing, really. So get some water. Sorry, you mind? I'm out.
Hydrate.
So, John, what are you building at the minute?
Oh gosh, what am I not building? I think I have the big Stug from DOS Work. I have a couple Shermans for our group build that we're doing. Let's see. So we have a charity build upcoming this weekend. So I'll be building some of the. I'm going to build the Federation tank from Legions, which is a game for Star Wars. So it's actually 147 scale. They're pretty cool. I'll have to send you a link. They're actually really nice models. But I have a little bit of everything on the bench. I have the attention span of probably a hamster. I just bounce all over.
Oh yeah, same here. Absolutely.
So
yeah, like, I'm researching British. The one thing that absolutely befuddles me, but I think they look good, are World War II British tank markings, because it's like hieroglyphics. You need the Rosetta Stone to understand that stuff, and I just simply don't get it. I need to get a set that I know is going to work on that model and put them on as I'm told. You know what I mean? I just so I'll be doing the kind of research of that, and I'll going through my pictures, and it's like, oh, shiny red ball. You know, there's a blown up RSO that looks so much more interesting than this very complicatedly marked British thing. But Spencer's done the beautiful job with it. It's a Canadian actually, but with the Archer that we
yes.
Some Tamiya models do drop through the gap a little bit, sadly, and the Archer was one of those. But it could only be a World War II British design, because it's only a mother could love that thing. You know, it's so weird. But that makes it cool. I think that ugly things look cool as model kits. The Apache helicopter, you know, and all these things, they look great.
That's called character.
It is
character, Marcus.
That's what my wife tells me. Yeah, I love you for your character and your money. Neither of which I have. So you know.
Well, Marcus, this has really been great. We got to let you get to bed at some point, but before we do, where can people find your modeling and also the Tamiya Modeling Magazine International? If somebody hasn't subscribed, where can they find you to do that?
It's very easy. We're called Doolittle Media now, because we had some problems a few years ago, which I'm sure people would love to talk about. But actually, our website is still adhpublishing.com. Oh my God, let me just confirm that it's got publishing and not just ADH. It is ADH Books, or you can go to ADH Publishing. I think they all kind of lead us back to our main website, and you can buy it all through. We take PayPal. Obviously, with the paper subscriptions, you can do it for as long as possible. I think the shortest one is 6 months, because it's kind of putting it on the system for 3 issues is a bit of a pointless exercise. But you know, you can subscribe for as long and short as you really like. We've got some offers on at the minute, keeping our prices down, because you know, obviously everything's going up crazily in price, so we're desperately trying to absorb increases in that sort of thing. But yeah, all the mags are there. ADH Publishing or adhbooks.com, and Pocket Mags, which sell every imaginable magazine. But if you want the digital edition, it's pocketmags.com. And if you just tap in Tamiya, ours will come up there with the latest issue, and that's pretty good. You put it on an iPad, that works nicely, and it's quite a lot cheaper. It's published on the day. You know, you can get it on the day of publishing rather than wait for it to come through the post and so on. So yeah, it has its benefits too. But yeah, we're always there. And then our Facebook group, just check out, if you just look for Tamiya Model Magazine on Facebook, and it'll come up. And you know, apply to join. It can be instant if I'm on it, or it can take 24 hours if middle of the night or whatever. But you know, join up, and people can ask any kind of question there they want. And I'm obviously admin moderator, but we've got the other guys who are looking after it too, and they point me in the direction of questions and stuff. So yeah, we're pretty easy to get hold of, to talk to. But yeah, no, buy the magazine, please. Keep me in the job.
Excellent. And if somebody wants to submit maybe a model to you to consider for publishing, how would they do that?
They can either private message me on the Facebook group, or they can email me. It's editor@tamiyamodelmagazine.com. Very easy to remember. Email, yeah, just drop me an email, as I said, or a private message, and then we can take it from there. Absolutely, yeah. Very simple process, really. Set of guidelines to follow, and you end up in print. Who knew? But yeah, no, it's been great to. I hope I haven't bored you.
No, this is awesome.
Yep.
And Ivan's got some things coming for me, I think, haven't you, dude?
Always, constantly.
I try not to pressure Ivan. He's such a good guy, and kind of like send him a box of kits to review for me. But I don't want to overwhelm him when I know that you're doing things in all different directions. So I don't want to overburden you with that.
I do love it. You say I've got 1 or 2 things coming, then like a box of 30 kits coming. It's like, oh right.
You haven't seen my stash, have you?
What
I don't need to buy kits ever again.
What Ivan really wants is that English proofreading job for the magazine. So
No,
yeah,
I
wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that either.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's one thing we do need is a proofreader. Actually, my goodness, yeah. It's we're a niche within the niche magazine, and the budgets aren't huge. So yeah, we do have typos, and I question my ability to see these sometimes. But it's funny how you don't see it on a screen, but as soon as you get the printed copy and you open it out, it's like jumps out in 3D neon. All these mistakes, you know. And I apologize. I've got a running standard apology for anyone who sees these and grits their teeth. You know, we'll try our best, but we're modelers first and journalists second. So I think that's more important, that we have good models and good pictures as the priority. I hope British Museum the British Library might argue with me on that point. You know, I just hope they don't have someone really clever sitting there going, oh, you know,
Amateurs,
absolutely.
with their red colored pencil circling things.
Oh, the red arrows. Oh my goodness, yeah. Oh, don't you love that when someone comes out with a new model kit, posts it online, and so this is coming from XYZ models, and then instantly someone's got they've opened it in the preview on their Mac or whatever, and you've got that little red arrow thing that you can point in, and they can say contours off here, and good.
Yeah.
I can, you know, I won't sleep tonight. Thanks. Yeah, that's.
Well, thank you so much, Marcus. It's been great talking with you. Some great stories, and
very honored to be asked. Thank you very much. It's lovely to chat with you guys.
well, we really, really appreciate it, and love the work you're doing with the magazine. You know, we usually share your posts. We'll continue to do that, and hopefully we'll talk with you again soon.
Please do, anytime.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus.
so much,
Thank you.
Marcus.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks very much.